vor dem Logo.
Machst du überall Erinnerungsfotos?
So, manchmal muss man seine Teilnahme rechtfertigen.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, can I welcome you for the afternoon session? You have a unique opportunity this afternoon. You are invited to criticize the observers who observe you when you make elections. It's a session, it's a special session because I have the honor for the Venice Commission to make a report on election observations on the last 25 years. I observed myself in the last 20 years over 90 elections as a representative of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. I was 24 years in the Swiss Parliament and 20 years in the Council of Europe. And after I finished, I got this mandate also because I think I have been president of the Council for Democratic Elections of the Venice Commission for some years, just until last year. So you saw in the program some questions. How are you perceiving the observation work, especially the international observations, I would say, not a bit less the domestic, because we are internationals. I'm especially aware that the Council of Europe, for instance, can only do its work because of the ODIHR work, because of the long-term observations of the ODIHR. That means our observation depends also on the quality of theirs, but it's nevertheless different because the parliamentarians who know elections from their own experiences have a special approach. And we are also especially aware that, and this was a product also of a learning process within the people who observed elections, that elections is a process, an ongoing process for many months, and in fact, to get the quality of elections, you have to evaluate the quality of the whole process, and there again, you depend of the views and the insights and the analysis provided to you by those who are on the field for a long time, and not just for some days where normal international observers come across in the country which has an election. Perhaps you read again the questions you were invited to answer. And before you are invited to take this opportunity and take the floor, I'm happy to give the floor to Andreas Kiefer. He is, as you know, the Secretary General of the Congress for Local and Regional Authorities in the Council of Europe, and he also has personal experiences of election observation, and he's also invited to share with us his conclusions, how he would improve the quality of his as observer and of his colleagues and our process of the observation. You have the floor, Andreas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Yes, as Andreas Gross said, this is the opportunity for you to speak to those who send international observers into your respective countries. I'm the face behind those many, some 2,500 members of the Congress that have observed more than 100 local and regional elections in the last 15 years. We are, as a Secretariat, supporting our members in this mandate that the Congress has. From some contacts during coffee breaks, I understood that for many the Congress is not so very well known. Just some words about our role. We are the third political body of the Council of Europe, next to the Committee of Ministers and the Parliamentary Assembly. The Congress has the same number of members, 324, as the Parliamentary Assembly, is composed of elected mayors, municipal councillors, district councillors, members of regional parliaments, presidents of regional executives, regional ministers, and so on, from the 47 member states. Our tasks is, one, to be a forum of exchange of politicians from the 47 member states. Secondly, to react to consultations by the Committee of Ministers whenever a European treaty is being prepared that has a local and regional dimension. The Congress is invited to comment on that. We are invited regularly to ministerial conferences of the Council of Europe, like last week, actually this week in Brussels, the Conference of Ministers of Education, preparing one of the future flagships of the Council of Europe, a curriculum for democracy education in this whole context of addressing the question whether our democratic values are being known and respected sufficiently. And of course, there is a local and regional dimension. We participate in ministerial conferences of the Ministers of Justice, which at the first look you could say, why? Well, the last ministerial conference had as a topic urban violence, and there again, of course, you have a very strong local and regional dimension, and in many countries, local police forces have a key role to play there. So in addition to this role as consultative body, as forum of exchange, we are also a monitoring body. When the Congress was established in 1994, member states entrusted our members with assessing the implementation of the European Charter of Local Self-Government by member states to the Congress. And the member states entrusted the Congress to observe local and regional elections, to prepare reports to the Committee of Ministers and recommendations to improve the situation. And lastly, the Congress is also an operational body. We implement many projects in the framework of Council of Europe action plans at local and regional level in the Eastern Partnership countries of the European Union, for example, and individually in Ukraine, in Albania, in Georgia, just to mention a few. So we do have a very wide horizon, and of course we are interested in getting feedback from those who are important partners for us when we prepare and implement election observation missions. We work very closely with the Parliamentary Assembly. We apply the same status, and just to show that we have a very good separation of tasks, I would like to mention the last observation mission in October 2015 in Ukraine, the local and regional elections on the 25th of October, the Congress deployed its largest ever delegation with 57 members from 25 member states, most of them Congress members, but there were also more than 10 members of the Parliamentary Assembly and 5 members of the Committee of the Regions of the European Union, a long-standing partner that we regularly invite to participate in our meetings, in our missions. We are working closely with OSCE ODIHR. We are very keen in maintaining the same standards that apply for international observers. We also have very close contact with our colleagues in the Parliamentary Assembly to make sure that we do the same. And even if we are at the same time in the same country, we separate our tasks. The next opportunity to be in the same country will be very soon, when in Serbia, parliamentary elections, local elections and regional elections in the Vojvodina will be held. The Congress will observe the local and regional elections. The Parliamentary Assembly will observe the national elections. In this case, probably under the responsibility of the same electoral commission, but it's 2, actually 3 separate elections that we are talking about. In 2015, we had 4 election missions in the Autonomous Territorial Unit of Gagauzia in Moldova itself, in Albania, and in Ukraine. We have established rules for our observers. We are trying to improve the quality of those people who come to your countries. We offer training sessions, and we recently have updated our code of conduct and our rules of procedure in order to ensure a high professional standard of our missions. I've prepared for you, and they are outside on the desk, copies of these brochures of the Congress Guide for observation of local and regional elections and the code of conduct in electoral matters of the Congress. So we are taking this responsibility that we have very seriously, and we want to make sure that the experience that our members have, many of our members are chairpersons of the local electoral commissions in their home, responsible for the organization of polling stations, of counting, of transmission of results, and so on. So we are coming with people who know their job, and the very positive side effect that we appreciate a lot is that also they learn a lot about new developments in other countries. We are very grateful also for invitations to countries that experiment. We had an invitation to observe the local elections in the Netherlands recently, and a couple of years ago in Norway, where in several municipalities electronic voting was tested. This is also a very good opportunity to share experiences, to learn from each other, and we are in a way a part of the distribution chain of good practices of the Council of Europe, which reaches out to many local authorities. As a look into the future, what do we have to discuss also with you? In an analysis of the results of our observation work, we have identified several so-called recurring horizontal issues, problems that occur in several countries. Several of those issues have been addressed during this conference. They concern the accuracy and quality of voters' lists, and also the question of voters residing de facto abroad. Secondly, questions of professionalization and depoliticization of the electoral administration at all levels. This we encounter especially at local level. The situation of independent candidates, access to media, access to be candidates as such, and I would like to refer you to a recently adopted Congress report on criteria for standing in local and regional elections, which gives a very good overview of the situation and addresses also some problems in several member states. The question of voting rights of internally displaced persons. We had this question in Ukraine very recently, but also the question for voting rights for refugees and migrants residing legally for a long time in a local authority. I think these are questions that we should address also at the Council of Europe level. And finally, and the Venice Commission is working on this issue as well, the misuse of administrative resources during electoral campaigns. We are currently preparing a report on this issue, which will be presented to the Congress session in October in the framework of our annual theme for 2016, which is ethics and transparency at local and regional level. So we are trying to add this dimension to the debate. For the processes and the role of the international observers, I would like to talk about some of the experiences I've referred to, and you find some of the points that we consider important in this little brochure. It contains do's and don'ts for election observation persons. We would be interested to get some feedback from you whether this is all we should take into account, whether there are some things that you think are not so relevant. This could stimulate the discussion afterwards, but we're also very happy to receive your written comments, and I think this do's and don'ts is a good opportunity without creating a crisis, so to say. It's to avoid problems, and that's something that we are very interested in. I have some concrete questions then for the debate, but I'm, again, as Andreas Groß, very interested to get your feedback, to have ideas of what we should look into specifically, where we should improve our performance in order to achieve the objective that we come as critical friends to remind the member states of the compliance with the norms that they have agreed to follow. We're not coming in a philosophy of a police mission. We're coming as critical friends, as friends who help to promote good democracy, and good democracy starts with free and fair elections. Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you, Andreas Kiefer. So, to come back to the questions, feel free to tell us how you appreciate, how you see the observers. Do you think they are useful? How you make use of their work? How do you evaluate their work? And do you take them into consideration, their remarks? And what are your proposals when you think about how to improve the observation mission from our side? Who would like to start, to take the floor? He waited 5 minutes before in the morning, and then it went well.
Thank you, Andreas. Maybe to start, you know, you have really very big experience in observation of elections, and you know very well that during the last years, maybe it's a question to you or to Andreas also, the level of Congress, more and more we observe the phenomenon that election observation missions are becoming more and more politically sensitive missions, and very often they are used, the conclusions, the final conclusions of such missions are used by the authorities and also by the oppositions of some countries to say that, to use in their own interests. My question is the following: how we can prevent and foresee such kind of dangers in order to have election observation missions which are neutral, impartial, and which could be seen as a form of cooperation in order to increase the quality of election observation missions? Because as for the Council of Europe, I mean, Parliamentary Assembly, usually we observe elections, you know, Andreas, very well, in countries which are under monitoring procedure or under the post-monitoring dialogue regime. I mean, we are observing in 13, 15 countries. What is your feeling in the context of this danger? Thank you.
Other questions? It should not be, it should be also a dialogue, but also a collection of what you think, how you appreciate or how you evaluate the quality of our work as observers.
Maybe may I ask a question?
Of course.
Well, I have one question that I would be interested in. How do those of you who have had local, regional, parliamentary observers to, well, what is happening in the press conference when the first assessment is announced? Is this a moment of being nervous? What is going to be told by the internationals? Which role does it have in the national scene? What the observers say?
Do you care what is in the
Yes.
press conference? It could be a problem that those countries who we are observing, are they really represented here? That's a problem. That those countries who are here, they are not being observed anymore. That's a problem we didn't solve really.
Well, there is a request for the floor.
Who? Yes.
Okay, I'm coming from Croatia, and since we have been joining European Union for ages, the process looked very long, and we have been observed by all sorts of organizations and monitoring missions, so we have some experience in that. Our experience is that it's good, and it's always good to have some impartial opinion. International organizations are far more professional in their reports, and then on a national level they are not considered to be politically colored, because we do have the domestic observation, very strong organizations, but they always incline to the one of the parties, or left or right. When you have international observers, this is more like a guarantee of impartiality on a political level, and I think this is one of the basic advantages of international organization. Though I have to say that sometimes their demands and their recommendations are going slightly over the capacity of the national bodies, and in this sense they can be discouraging. You know, as long as you're kind of in your report putting reasonable requests that can be reached, it's encouraging. If you are putting the level too high, sometimes they will just wave your hand and say, okay, you guys, you're rich, you can do whatever you want. We cannot reach that standard anyhow. So this is it's kind of our experience with the observers. Nowadays we are having, everybody can observe. So it's international, domestic, NGOs, as well as representatives of the political parties. And for the election, I think it's very important that you have registered observers of the political parties, because this is what gives the balance on the election day. Of course, they are not impartial, but most of the members of the polling stations are not impartial since being members of the certain party. But the more people are watching, there is a less possibility that something went wrong. So this is our experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's a classical problem that some of the recommendations are not in the reach of the authorities. That's why, and I know that from Switzerland also, that the critics of ODIHR can't be matched by the authorities. They have to go to the parliament because they need parliamentary decisions. So that would be also a question, are you ensuring that the parliament gets the information from the international observations? Because sometimes you have to ask as parliamentarians, and the authorities don't provide the parliamentarians, although they have to make changes when they want to live up to the recommendations. The other point you made is linked to the introductory question of Schema form, because the quality, to be really impartial and neutral, you have to have a sound and robust normative notion of democracy and what election really is. And I think there you have the normative base of criteria, in the sense also of Andreas mentioned, has to be so serious that there you can see that you don't depend on the information of the opposition or the majority. And the best way to show is that you are also able to criticize both when you make a critique, because often the opposition is also lacking of quality, and it's important to say this. And by doing this in a developed way, this is the best protection to be against to be instrumentalized by one of them. And I think, although you're right, it's sometimes very difficult, and sometimes everybody wants you to say something which they please. The more you are sure to be close to the truth, the better. This is the better protection against instrumentalization. But it needs also sometimes courage, because there are also threats, clear threats, when you say sometimes the truth, because not everybody likes to hear it. And concerning the domestic observations, I also think yesterday it came out in the afternoon in a working shop that the international should work closely to the domestic. And this is, of course, a good idea, but then one element of the one question mark has to be said, that often the domestic are coming from one side, but there are also good exceptions. For instance, in Serbia or in Armenia, you have real NGOs who are independent and try to cover all the polling stations. And these people are very interesting as resource persons, because they observe more polling stations in more time of the day, sometimes nearly 12 hours or 10 hours, and to listen what they tell you also in the polling stations. This is a good sign of cooperation. This is very helpful. But sometimes the NGOs or the domestic observations are as partisan as the parties themselves, and there you have to be careful. Other remarks? It's true that not so many people from in the Parliamentary Assembly. We have 10 countries who are on the regular observation now. From these 10 countries, not so many people are here. Russia, Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia. Georgia is here. I don't see them.
Well, if I may add, for the Congress, we have a slightly different approach, both for the compliance with the European Charter of Local Self-Government. We monitor all 47 countries. We have a work plan of visiting every country every 5 to 6 years. And for the observation of local and regional elections, we accept invitations from the respective bodies of the countries concerned. I referred to the Netherlands and to Norway earlier, so we are not limited to specific countries. We offer our services to all of them. Technically speaking, we need an invitation to observe the elections. This invitation must come to us from the body that can grant access to polling stations, to participate, also to follow what is happening in the polling station, including the vote count. So this can be a national ministry, this can be a national central election commission, this can also be a regional government or a regional committee. We have received, for example, the invitation to observe the local elections in the Région Bruxelles-Capitale in Belgium, because at this level it is the responsible body. We were, unfortunately, due to deadlines, not able to accept this invitation. So our invitation, well, we are happy to receive invitations from all the 47 member states. We have experiences also in the Palestine territories in 2008. So in countries that are connected to the Council of Europe neighborhood policy, we would look into possibilities. Financially, and as far as the Secretariat is concerned, we are able to run 3 to 5 or 6 observation missions per year. And I would like also really to invite you to consider whether for local elections that you are responsible for, you would want to have the experience and the feedback from the Congress. During our monitoring activities as the Parliamentary Assembly, we are very grateful for having opportunities to exchange with the election management bodies at whatever level. It is a very important source of information in addition to the good contacts that
used to go to observe, because they say one does not observe the elections in a European Union country. And we went, and our delegation made very tough statements, because you saw many problems until stealing ballot sheets in the print shop in the Saturday night before the Sunday elections. So it was very useful, and those fellow members of the European Union who thought that when you are in the Union you don't have any problems, they were totally mistaken. Do you have any questions or observations to the observers you would like to share with us? When it's not the case, we don't want to prolong. Yes?
Hello, I'm Holly Ruthroff. I work with the EU through the EODS project on developing their methodology. And as you know, the EU observes not in the states of OSCE or as part of the Human Rights Action Plan. So in terms of the EU, that means that we've started sending follow-up missions to countries, for instance, midway through an electoral cycle, to look at the extent to which recommendations that have been made previously have been implemented or not. Also, delegations have been tasked, EU delegations in countries where observation has taken place in the past have been tasked to look at this issue of follow-up, what technical assistance can be provided, for instance, to ensure that the recommendations can be reiterated and so on. And I'd just be interested to know, in terms of the Council of Europe and the Congress, what mechanisms are being developed, or whether that's an area that you've also been working on. Thank you.
That's a very good point, and I share totally the idea that this is a field where we can improve our work and also make our work more efficient and more effective. Until now, we have several ways of doing it. Sometimes you also have a post-electoral mission. That means those people, the core people of the delegation goes again, because, for instance, in Macedonia, those who lost the elections, they questioned the legitimacy of the election in a way that they didn't went into the parliament afterwards. And for more than 1 year, they didn't have any opposition presence in the parliament until, so to say, the next elections. And in such moments, we try to go and try to mediate and try to find encourage compromises. The same thing happened also in Albania about 4 years ago. And the other point is that we have a monitoring committee, and as I said, because we observe monitoring countries under the monitoring process, then we have rapporteurs of the monitoring committee. Would be a real need is that, and I hear also from the ODIHR that they also think in these terms that before you go to the next mission, you should look how the recommendations of the mission before has been respected. Because sometimes you see a repetition of recommendations in several missions over the years, and this means this is a clear sign that they have not been taken on board, so to say. And also the information between the organizations, although we work, as I said, closely with the ODIHR, but sometimes the report of the ODIHR comes much later, 2 months later, and is it sure that those the recommendations in this detailed report are really taken into account by the other organizations? This is also not so sure. And perhaps as a third element, we should really address the authorities, not only the electoral bodies, because as we said, they have a limited capacity or the limited authority also, but the government, the ministry and the parliament, if they have looked to it and what they have done and what they have not done and why not, and if they are still ready to think about it. So that's really a good point you made. And in the Council of Europe, the monitoring committee helps, but I'm not sure. I'm sure that we can still improve that. Andreas, would you like to say?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to confirm what was said about the work of the European Union. Our partner organization, the Committee of the Regions, accepts invitations to join the Congress in monitoring in election observation missions only to candidate countries and Eastern Partnership countries. So while we go to member states as well, they do not. The logic about follow-up has been developed in the last couple of years quite significantly and substantially. We started with our monitoring activities and wanted to avoid that the monitoring reports and the recommendations to member states are shelved. We developed, therefore, a so-called post-monitoring dialogue where we engage in discussions with the governments of the member states concerned, referring to our recommendations and inviting to identify the country to identify the 3, 4, or 5 most important points for activities. And then develop a roadmap, develop individually strategies on how to implement. We have concluded roadmaps with Ukraine, Portugal concerning the strengthening of the financial capacity of smaller municipalities. With Georgia, we are preparing roadmaps with Armenia and Moldova, and the example of Ukraine shows that the government has invited the Council of Europe to send experts to the Constitutional Commission of the Verkhovna Rada, and it was the Venice Commission and it was the Congress who were invited to send an expert into these negotiations. Inspired from these monitoring activities, we have developed also a post-election observation dialogue with member states where we discuss the implementation of our recommendations. And it is new. It is one of the results of the reforms that were implemented by Secretary General Torbjörn Jagland in having a new approach in the intergovernmental structure of the Council of Europe and in associating the political bodies, Parliamentary Assembly and Congress, that Congress recommendations, for example, are taken into account by the other services when drafting Council of Europe action plans concerning the judiciary, the democracy field, rule of law. And when it comes to the democracy, also the Congress recommendations are taken into account, leading to concrete actions, as activities in the framework of Council of Europe action plans, which are funded generously by the European Union, generously by Denmark, Norway, Switzerland, and many other countries. So there is, from our side, more and more the approach not only to produce a recommendation, but to also provide the so-called service après-vente, so service when you have sold the product, that we support member states to implement what they actually want to, because in many cases there is an interest of the respective authorities to improve the situation, to develop the situation further.
Thank you. Any other remark or intervention? Yes.
Hello, my name is Ivo Ivko from Bulgarian Managing Board. As I heard, you mentioned that Bulgaria was not a very sure place, and that's why many observers refused to go. Did I understand correctly? And if yes, would you please explain what kind of risks they met, and because it's something new for us?
That was a misunderstanding. It was not because of the safetiness or the sureness, but some of the European Union colleagues, they thought it's not, you don't deserve an observation because the quality of your elections, I'm sure they did not know about the elections in Bulgaria, but they are sure that they have a high quality and you don't need to go there. That was the reason they went there. They didn't went there.
Didn't understand correctly. Thank you very much.
But we went there, and we were very much confirmed that we had to go there.
Yeah, thanks.
This you may not agree, but that's possible. Or question? The point the EU colleague made, and Andreas answered also, when I was in a Carter Center recently, a colleague who was working for a long time in the ODIHR, and he's now in the Carter Center, he thought a little bit even further that the observation of elections perhaps should be replaced in the future by an ongoing monitoring of the democratic development in a country. So in the sense that you are aware that the selling is not a moment, it's not a Sunday who sells democracy by election, but it's a process, and this process has to be observed and monitored, and then recommendations have to be made, and then you can look immediately how they are answered. So he thinks that the observation of elections could be replaced by an ongoing monitoring or periodically monitoring of the quality of democracy, which has to be defined, which is more than just elections, but elections, of course, is included. And then when you try to implement the results of the monitoring, you overcome, so to say, you go further than the questions of the implementing of observation results. That was an observation or an idea which I thought it's worthwhile to think about. But I'm also sure that some countries, they don't like us to do that. And even in Africa by the EU, I guess.
Okay. One request, a final request, if you consider inviting the Congress to elections, please respect approximately a deadline of 2 months, 60 days for us to prepare. I think for the 6th of May for the UK it will be too late. For the 5th of June for Romania we would just manage. For September in Armenia, this is also something that we are having on our radar, is still possible. So if you or your respective authorities are considering inviting a Congress delegation, which can be either a smaller one from 8 to 10 people or a larger one, which is around 20 people, please let us know as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. And when you have a good idea and it comes later on, you will, as Andreas also mentioned, we are very welcome when you send it or when you mail it to us. It's a learning process, and we would like to learn also by those who are observed, but I understand that we choose perhaps the wrong public, so to say, or not totally the perfect public, so we have to try again there too. Thank you very much.
document? Yeah? Shall I zoom in again? Well, usually go through all paragraphs even quickly because it's a question. They adopt the whole document, so I think it's. Yeah, normally yes.
Just the conclusions.
Well, it's what we. Yeah, so I can go quickly
Anyway,
through.
the cover page they don't need.
No, but it's just to present the draft synopsis. But then we have to ask the people to join us. If we're starting. Ok. Alors on attend maintenant les deux modérateurs. Et j'ai imprimé ici. Thomas, tu veux la dernière version? Si Vous pouvez vous asseoir là et moi je gère ici les corrections. So, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to draw your attention to the anticipated agenda of this afternoon. So, as we finished earlier the special event moderated by Andreas Gross, then we suggest to go ahead with the conclusions of the conference, of this 13th edition of the EMB conference. Our proposal is on the screen, so now I invite you to have a quick look at the first page. The first page is a factual one. It's not as such, these are not as such the conclusions, but purely the factual elements of the conference. First of all, the Venice Commission, the Council of Europe, organized in cooperation with the Permanent Electoral Authority of Romania, the 13th European Conference of Electoral Management Bodies in Bucharest, Romania, on 14th and 15th of April 2016. Then the second paragraph recalls simply the title of the topic of this conference, and then the subparagraphs of the three titles, the three subtopics of the plenary sessions. Then you have a paragraph on the opening session and the personalities who intervened during the opening session. So I guess it's not, let's say, disputable. Then we give here in this paragraph a few information about the number of participants, the number of countries represented in this conference. And then we added a paragraph on the international institutions who also took part in the conference. So if there is no request for the floor, I suggest to go through the conclusions themselves. So as we do usually, if the moderators agree, we could go paragraph by paragraph, and then of course you will be given the floor if requested for in the course, regarding the chronology, let's say, of these conclusions. So the conference took note of the conclusions of the first electoral expert debates, then the title of the first electoral debates, held in Bucharest on 12th and 13th April 2016, and encourage further editions of the electoral expert debates. Do you agree to have further editions of the electoral expert debate? Yes, congratulations. Then, second paragraph, took note of the research project. So this was the project introduced by our colleagues from the University of East Anglia. Then what we suggest, following their request, is to endorse this project research and to endorse the project to undertake a survey of electoral management bodies personally in Europe. We also suggest to encourage electoral management bodies to nominate a survey facilitator and to complete the survey. And finally, to agree to follow up the survey at the next European Conference of Electoral Management Bodies. Do you agree on these proposals? Thank you. Then we thought that it could be useful to recall the conclusions of the last EMB conference devoted to e-voting. It was in Tallinn in 2012. These conclusions are still publicly, let's say, open to the public on the web, and we had a look also to these conclusions just to ensure that we would not have any contradictions with these conclusions of this past EMB conference, which was also devoted to new technologies in elections. So do you agree also to include this reference to this Tallinn conference? Thank you. Then we suggest to refer to this special event that took place this afternoon about the 25 years of international election observation, and to commend the forthcoming publication of a report on this topic. And then I see a slight mistake. A methodological aspect, of course, if you have also problems not only with the content but also with the format, don't hesitate to take the floor, especially if you're a native English speaker. It could, of course, improve the quality of the document. So, coming back to this fourth paragraph, do you agree to mention and to commend the forthcoming publication of a report on 25 years of international election observation? Good, it was a test. Thank you, Holly. No, in fact, it was not a test. So let me correct this. Thank you. So thank you. Then the fifth paragraph recalled the relevance of existing international standards for democratic elections and their applicability to new technologies in elections. So I guess it can be agreeable to all of you. This is simply to recall that obviously international electoral standards should apply to electoral processes surrounded by new technologies. So I guess there will be no, let's say, contradiction or let's say debate on this. So thank you. And then we, the three following paragraphs, we refer to two documents. In paragraph number 6, we refer to the recommendation of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe of 2004. This is an old document, but then following this mention, because it's still an existing international document in the field, we also refer to the forthcoming review of this recommendation. And you heard about the intervention of Gregor on this topic, Gregor being the chairman of this group of experts in charge of reviewing extensively, I would say, this recommendation, because 10 years in the world of new technologies is like 1 century in the normal world. So this review will be quite, is quite a necessity. So we wanted also maybe to suggest to commend this review. And then also to recall the Council of Europe's Parliamentary Assembly resolution on electronic democracy, so also dealing, yes, for the ones who do not know this document, this is the opportunity to have a look at this interesting document, which was adopted by our political body, the Parliamentary Assembly, on electronic democracy. So it's also about e-voting technologies, or let's say new voting technologies. So do you agree with these paragraphs? Yes, Gregor?
Thank you very much. I appreciate to see it in the conclusions. It's just a little bit about the wording. At number 7, I would say commended the ongoing update of this recommendation, because update is the term that we actually use, which is also the terms of reference, and since it's not forthcoming but already
the ongoing
update. Yeah, well, it's really, they call the update.
Review,
yeah,
update?
Yeah. No, just the update, because that's what they call in the terms of reference, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, any further remark on this paragraph or on the two others concerning these documents? Thank you. Then paragraph number 9, sorry. Acknowledge the potential of new technologies for improving public trust and efficiency of electoral processes, inter alia to enhance turnout, including for vulnerable groups. So as from this paragraph, we have tried to reflect the conclusions of the different working sessions. So you have all the floor, and of course, in particular, the moderators, but not only, the participants of these various working sessions. So, any comment on this paragraph number 9? By the way, do you see, all of you, do you see the screen? Is it enough big? I can even zoom in again. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. All right. Yes, Anna Cristina?
Well, I think that as it regards efficiency, and you say efficiency of electoral processes, I would say efficiency of the management of the elections.
Excuse me?
I mean, efficiency of the electoral management or something like that. The idea, I know, if you think it's right, if not, leave it.
Okay, I don't know if there were participants of this discussion. The idea here is to reflect the importance of the impact, let's say, of new technologies in elections. So when we choose the terminology electoral processes, it's with the intention to cover the full election cycle, let's say. If you refer to election management, wouldn't it be confusing? Maybe you would refer to electoral management bodies and not to elections. So I don't know, the discussion is open, so we can put electoral management if it's clear for all participants. Yes,
well, I
Thomas?
think the original wording is better because e-voting is not really a management issue, and I think since we speak about potential, we should use a broad wording and not a narrow wording. We don't say it improves, but has potential to improve.
Thank you, Thomas. Christina, so despite your proposal, would you agree to maintain the initial wording? It's okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any other requests for the floor? Any comments on this paragraph? Don't be shy and don't hesitate if you have any doubts in the wording, in the content. Yes, Gregor, please.
I'm not a native speaker, just not sure, shouldn't it be said including vulnerable groups instead of including off vulnerable groups? I'm not sure if the off is correct.
Holy native speakers say yes. All right, thank you. Then it's even a shortened document. Thank you. Thank you. Paragraph 10 noted that this potential can only be realized if adequate conditions are in place in terms of legal framework, as well as of capacities of electoral management bodies, and if introduced and implemented with full transparency and as part of a comprehensive approach. Holly, I see you moving a bit. Do you have any suggestion to improve maybe the... No? Catherine? Yes, Beata, please. Could you put the microphone?
Apologies. Just one small suggestion. Perhaps we can say as part of a gradual and comprehensive approach, just to get that notion of a step-by-step process into that.
Okay. Any other remarks? Thank you. So paragraph 11 noted the wide range of existing voting methods and, let's say, put it in italics, and recognized the right of countries to choose and then to choose traditional means of voting or e-voting technologies, starting where appropriate with pilot projects. So again, we tried here to take into consideration the discussion in that working session and to reflect the various situations, domestic situations, let's say. So are you happy with this proposal? It seems to be the case. Thank you. So paragraph 12, underline the necessity of ensuring reliability through the whole electoral processes, including when new technologies are used in elections. I guess it's not the most, the clearest paragraph of these conclusions. I see some faces doubting. So if I correctly understood the conclusions of that working session, the idea here is to underline the necessity for reliable electoral processes while being surrounded by new technologies. But maybe we could rephrase the sentence if you're not convinced by the existing wording. Pierre.
So shouldn't we delete just at the end in elections between it concerns new technologies also concern the whole electoral process? To be clear, I think it would be clearer and now I notice.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, maybe it's clear with my explanation, but maybe my explanation being only for this audience, we could rephrase if you think about a better wording, maybe. Gregor, no?
We were just thinking whether reliability is such a good term for that, and I was not sure either. But at least the end of it is including when new technology, perhaps including the use of new technologies or something. Perhaps that would be sound a little bit crisper. I'm not a native speaker, but including the use of new technologies, perhaps that would be a little bit more precise. Yeah.
Excuse me, Holly, could you switch on the microphone? Yes, please.
Well, Gregor was asking my opinion of the wording, but for me the sentence isn't exactly clear. I mean, I think we should say reliability of what?
Okay.
I mean, are we talking about voting machines or the reliability of the...
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
So,
and then you have the whole electoral processes, so just a grammar note, it needs to be singular process.
And I guess if we say of ensuring reliable electoral processes, this is not fully... There is nothing revolutionary, I would say, so it's not really convincing. Of ensuring reliable electoral processes. Thomas?
Do we need the paragraph? I think it goes without saying that it's important that everything is reliable. So I think
Well,
we are
yes,
stating a bit too much the obvious here.
It's common sense, that's true. So does the audience agree to simply delete this paragraph? Okay. Yes, Katharine? Could you switch on the microphone in case we need
Sorry,
interpretation?
is integrity what you're looking for as a word instead of reliability? The rest makes sense. And if you
we could switch to integrity without any problem with me. I mean, yeah. So we would maintain the paragraph and to refer to the necessity of ensuring integrity
of the process, yeah.
So, processes. So underline the necessity of ensuring the integrity of the whole electoral process, including the use of new technologies. Including when new technologies are used. Thanks, Beta. Catherine, okay? Holly? Okay. If the native speakers say yes, then it's fantastic. Stephen.
Native speaker.
I would take out including when new technologies are used. I think we're talking here about new technologies.
True, yeah. So
to remove including.
Right, is this the focus, yeah?
Sorry, okay. Okay, so is there an agreement with this revised version of paragraph 12? Thank you. Paragraph 13 concurred on the importance of respecting in practice the principle of secrecy of the vote. Well, I have to admit that we modified several times this paragraph. At the end, it does not reflect anymore the situation of e-voting or e-enabled elections, let's say. So it's a bit a general paragraph. It's also common sense, but it's also important to recall such important aspects. So yeah, Gregor? Robert, sorry.
I just don't see the need for in practice if it's just a reiteration of this importance of the principle of secrecy.
Especially the chronology of the paragraphs would, if we maintain this paragraph, maybe it would be better at another place that's here in the middle of technical matters or more concrete matters, but it's up to you. I don't mind. I have no strong feeling, let's say.
Language-wise, it doesn't fit for me there. I mean, of respecting the principle of secrecy of the vote in practice, but not in the middle of the sentence. But that's just my reading of it.
Sure. Yes.
Well, I think the main part here when we talk about secrecy of the vote in our conference is when introducing new technologies, these new technologies, so that they can be accepted, they must confirm the secrecy of the vote, because it's the most modern democracy. They have this as a guarantee. So new technologies must have must maintain this guarantee as a a practical principle, I guess, to relate one each other.
Two options, two alternatives, I would say. Either we simply delete this paragraph because this is common sense and we consider that it's enough obvious not to mention this, or the other alternative would be to maintain this paragraph, but of course focusing on e-enabled elections or whatever the terminology retained. Beata and then Shmavan.
I would be in favor of retaining, but with the proviso that it's particularly within new election technologies, because that element of secrecy is particularly problematic in transferring votes and needs to be recognized. I would also agree with Mr. Krimmer that the in practice doesn't do very much work in that sentence, and I would delete that.
Okay, Shmavan?
Can I suggest maybe another wording in saying that the use of new technology in practice should not undermine the principle of secrecy of the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Shmavan. So we go back to the two initial alternatives with a new proposal, new wording. So should we maintain, first question, should we maintain or simply delete this paragraph? And if we maintain it, then we can try this with this new wording. So, Shimon, could you just...
Yes, I said that the use of new technology in practice should not undermine.
Should we Can we agree on this revised version of this paragraph? So, stress that the use of new technologies should not undermine the secrecy of the vote. Of course, I know it's a bit frustrating because we let's say, sum up, we shorten the conclusions of the various working groups. So this is one sentence being let's say, the output of 1 hour and 1.5 hours of discussions. But I want to be sure that it reflects the spirit of your discussions, of your debates. And that also it can be understandable by external readers. Gregor, yes.
No, but I think the sentence does justice in that respect. I was in the group and it was a lot of discussion, but that was the essence of it, because there's so many different voting systems. Of course, also the degree of technology is different from country to country. So I think what we can all agree upon is secrecy of the vote is necessary. So I think that does it justice.
All right, thank you, Gregor. So can we agree on this paragraph 13 as revised? Thank you very much. So, paragraph 14, underline the importance of balancing transparency of electoral processes and protection of personal data with the use of such personal data for electoral purposes. Again, we tried to reflect the discussions of one of the working sessions on the issue of personal data protection, because as you know well, and we had the example of Kyrgyzstan, you need to have access, and including private companies may have access to personal data in order to achieve, in order to prepare a number of phases of electoral processes. Robert, please.
I think generally I'm fine with this balancing transparency and then protection of personal data, but then the second part from with the use of such personal data for electoral purposes, I don't know how, or it needs to be reformulated, but I'm still thinking how.
Well, you're right, it's implicit, so maybe it's not necessary to recall that we speak about electoral purposes here. So underline the importance of balancing transparency of electoral processes and...
Yes, therein. Oh. Therein, yeah.
Or maybe for interpretation, I'm afraid we still need the microphones, Robert. For interpretation, I don't know.
Just, and protection of personal data therein, meaning referring to electoral processes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So next paragraph, recommended in this respect the supervision of the use of personal data by independent bodies. Again, we reflect one of the conclusions of one of the working sessions. The idea here was to, let's say, refer either to electoral management bodies or to, maybe preferably, to other independent institutions in order to secure, let's say, the data, the protection of personal data. So it was, I think, if I correctly understood, following this working group, it was the spirit of such proposal.
I mean, that is basically reiterating the Convention on Data Protection of the Council of Europe, so we could generally refer to that. I mean, that really is what the Convention is about.
We can indeed refer to this convention of the Council of Europe on data protection. I do not have in mind the exact wording of the convention, but we can revise this paragraph. Recommended in this respect the supervision. So should we keep the wording, or should we simply refer to the convention and the necessity to have compatibility between of enabled elections with the European Convention on the data protection? Something like that. So recommended in this respect. It's a suggestion, so don't hesitate to take the floor on the compatibility of enabled elections with the. I will find the exact wording.
Convention 108, that's what I remember, but then the exact wording I also don't know.
Excuse me?
It's the convention number 108. That's what I know.
Say it again, I'm sorry, I'm a bit tired.
Convention number 108, that's what I know. But the exact wording on data protection, I don't know exactly, but it's 108.
Thank you. Any other remark on this paragraph? Oh, yes, right. The exact title, you mean, Catherine? If you have it, yes, with pleasure.
Okay, it says Convention for the Protection of Individuals. With regard to automatic processing of personal data. I'm faster.
Automatic processing.
Processing of personal data.
Thank you very much, Catherine. So can we agree on this revised version of paragraph number 15? Thank you very much. So next paragraph, stress the importance of the possibility for voters to review the use of their personal data for electoral purposes, especially regarding voters' lists. So it seems to be agreeable to all of you. Thank you. Next paragraph took note of the importance of the proper use of new technologies in maintaining the accuracy of voters' lists and registers. So there are two different ideas between the previous paragraph and this one. The previous paragraph is about the possibility for voters to access to their own personal data and how their personal data was used in the context of elections, of a pre-electoral period, in the context of a biometric registration, for instance. And the other paragraph is about the importance of ensuring the accuracy of voters' lists, voter registers as a whole. It's not about voters, but about, let's say, accuracy of such documents while being surrounded by new technologies. Goodbye, Stephen. Bye-bye, Beata. So, is it enough clear to you? Is it fine? Thank you. Then there was a very interesting discussion about the private providers, ICT providers and electoral management bodies, and here we try to reflect this discussion. So it's the paragraph number 18 pointed out the need that the choice of new technologies is guided by the needs of electoral management bodies and not by the interest of technology providers. It may be polemic, but it's the reflect of the discussion of this working group. So it's up to you participants to validate this proposal or not. Arnis, good, do you agree? If one of the pillars of our electoral management body agrees, then I just want to be sure that you understand the spirit behind this proposal. Huh? This is about the risk of, let's say, a conflict of interest at the end between private companies lobbying for their equipment, material, vis-à-vis electoral management bodies. And we know how you, representatives of electoral management bodies, are pressured by your budgetary constraints from one side and by, let's say, results, oriented results, I would say, regarding electoral processes that you manage. So, Anna Cristina and then Robert. Anna Cristina, please.
Well, it's a short remark. Maybe it could be phrased like pointed out that the electoral management body's choice of new technologies should, or should be guided by I mean, it was the idea not to use the word need twice, and also to make reference to, I mean, it's not only the need of the electoral management body, but that need comes from the legal framework, maybe, or something. So, let's see, would be the electoral management body's choice or choosing of the technologies should be guided by or it is the electoral management body choice to select or to establish the requirements of...
Yes, I mean, we speak about procurement, and it's true that in such situations...
Yes, it was the idea not to, I mean, to put the subject that the EMB is the one that makes the choice, and following what the legal framework establishes and not the commercial interests of the providers.
Your point, Christina, so let's see if Robert
I have a suggestion there. So, pointed out the election management body's choice of new technologies is guided by the needs of the electoral process, and that's my point. It shouldn't be the needs of the election management body, but it should be the needs of the election process. Choice of new technologies is guided by the needs of the electoral process. Electorate as well, yeah. And then delete everything till end. Yeah.
Should we maintain the end of the sentence? So
not, and you can, I think, delete the by, and then not the interest of the technology.
So let me read again this revised version. Pointed out the electoral management body's choice of new technologies.
Should be guided. Should be guided,
exactly,
I think, yeah?
Okay. Pointed out that the electoral management body's choice of new technologies should be guided by the needs of electoral processes, of the electoral process, and not the interest of technology providers. I'm not sure about English, but I'm not native speaker. Shemavan, yes, please. Sorry, I forgot you.
Yes, it is the same. Just I'd like to propose after the word guided by the needs of improving of the electoral process, just not the, but by the quality or by improving the quality of the electoral process. Thank you.
I'm not sure it fits with in terms of let's say fluidity of the sentence. I agree with your point. I see your point, Shmovan, but then how it is built now, I'm not sure it fits. But any further suggestions?
I mean, when we introduce this improving, it basically takes away the emphasis on the needs as such, which can be defined as deficiencies, right? And you can improve an electoral process, but you cannot improve the needs, and the need to improving is clear, but the needs as such is the thing that should be proportionate, right?
Yes.
That's why I don't think it would really add value. Yeah?
So Shimawan, can we forget your suggestion improving? Okay, so let me read last time this sentence. Pointed out that the electoral management body's choice of new technologies should be guided by the needs of the electoral process and not the interest of technology providers. All right, thank you very much. Next paragraph, number 19, pointed out the importance for electoral management bodies to get a proper expertise to direct and supervise the use of new technologies during electoral processes, including through appropriate means and training programs. We try to sum up different conclusions and debates from at least two different working groups in this sentence. So I let you time to read again this proposal.
Instead of get, which is very colloquial, can you put gain? To gain without article. To gain proper expertise.
Okay, thank you, Katharine. Any other remark, intervention?
It could be then also gain proper expertise in directing and supervising. So.
Thank you, Robert. Any other remark or suggestions? All right, thank you very much. So, yes, Gregor, sorry.
Sorry, no, just to make sure, what are the appropriate means versus, let's say, the training programs? Just to, means is very, very broad.
I'm trying to remember to
program
remind
is very narrow. That's why
the discussions behind this proposal. Here, the idea was to mention, in addition to the first part of the sentence, so after the comma, to mention also mention the discussions which concluded that it would be necessary for EMBs to have human and financial means. If I'm not wrong, I may have misunderstood the discussion, but to have the appropriate, let's say, yes, financial and human means to be able to conduct, to direct and supervise the use of such technologies. But I'm not sure about that. For the training programs, I think it's enough clear. Appropriate means, do you see for participants of that working group on... Okay, we can simply forget this part. I mean, including through appropriate training programs or through training programs, simply speaking. But it's true that appropriate means, honestly, I don't see to what we refer to. So
it's very vague. That's the only thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand, even though I haven't been in there, what it means. You take care of the infrastructure, take care of the personnel.
I think it was about infrastructures, but I'm not fully sure. So okay, including through appropriate training programs or simply through training programs.
I mean, there's just one thing that is important there. I mean, what we want to achieve is that the EMB is independent from, or basically is able to make its own decisions, right?
Exactly.
So for that, it needs to build up capacity, right? So it could be including through building up capacity and appropriate training programs.
Including, excuse me?
Through building up capacity and appropriate training programs. Meaning that they hire staff that know how to do things, and the other one is training existing staff.
And appropriate training without programs, without... So including through building up capacity but then...
I mean, or appropriate training programs, so that's what we could do. I mean, I would leave, training is also fine, it's just, I'm not very, either way.
We don't speak about fitness, huh? Training programs, okay. So thank you for these suggestions. And next paragraph, number 20. We are close to the end, huh? Be patient. So we have 26 paragraphs. So 20. Recommending raising awareness of voters regarding the use of new technologies in elections, including through civic education and public outreach programs. So it was also the conclusion of one of our debates on the fact that having new voting technologies is, of course, good, but then if you want to get public trust, you also need to have a minima uninformed, let's say, public, informed voters. So we do not specify if it would impact the work of the MPs or other public authorities. My personal idea would be to be broader and to speak about public authorities. This is the responsibility of the public authorities to inform the voters about new means of voting. So this is what is behind this proposal. Okay? Thank you. 21. Pointed out the issue of verifiability of the vote if electronic voting is used and the importance of providing effective means of verification while conducting e-enabled elections. So we spoke before about the issue of reliability. Here this is the issue of verifiability. And I think this is quite topical to deal with this issue of verifiability in the context of new voting technologies. So in a nutshell, it's good to have e-enabled elections, but then you also have to get the means as EMBs, but also as public authorities to be able to have the means to verify, let's say, the reliability of such systems. This is the idea, the spirit of this proposal. Are you happy with the wording and with the content of this paragraph? All right, thank you. 22 noted that electronic voting poses a challenge to traditional methods of election observation and underlined the need to ensure the effectiveness of domestic and international election observation where electronic voting is used, which should imply a shared responsibility between observer organizations and electoral authorities. Here, this is directly, it comes from the discussions on election observation, as you could guess. It is also the result of the debate, and there was like contradicting views on the fact that electronic voting is not panacea. You should also leave open the possibility for countries to have or to revert back to traditional means of voting. So we also tried here to refer to this and to the work of election observers in this context. Shanavan.
As for the last part, should imply a shared responsibility between observers organization and election authorities. I'm afraid that it could create some confusions because elections, including with the use of new technologies, are organized by election authorities. And I don't see where should be the shared responsibility in this context.
It was a proposal from Stephen Martin from the ODA, but unfortunately he left 15 minutes ago, so we cannot give him the floor. He had some ideas behind this proposal, and unfortunately I'm not able to explain you further what was behind this proposal. What I understood in this proposal is that there would be a responsibility from the side of election observers to report. This is the work of many citizen, let's say NGOs, citizen organizations, and also many international institutions observing elections by issuing reports on their observation, on one side. On the other side, it's also the responsibility of electoral management bodies or electoral authorities as a whole to take into consideration such reports, such reporting from observers, either domestic or international ones. But I have no strong feelings, so I mean we would not lose the relevance of this paragraph if we forget the end of the paragraph, meaning after the comma. Okay, so I suggest to simply to delete this part. Can we agree on this revised version of the paragraph? Are you happy with this revised proposal? Thank you. Paragraph number 23, recognize the importance of identifying and promoting new initiatives, facilitating voter registration and increasing turnout for voting abroad when provided for by law. Here, the idea was to reflect the discussion of the working session on voting abroad. We know that it can be a sensitive issue for many countries. It's why we wanted to specify when provided for by law. And the idea here is to, let's say, make a statement on the importance of reliability of voter registration and also the potential increased turnout of voters abroad. Robert.
Okay, so I think the first part, facilitating voter registration, is fine, but then, and increasing turnout for voting abroad, I think that is the aim of that voter registration, because otherwise, so we need to change that somehow, because it would read, when provided for by law, would refer to increasing turnout for voting abroad.
Well, it's true that
so we need to somehow...
better voter registration will definitely increase the
So facilitating voter registration with the aim of increasing voter turnout for voting abroad, and then it makes sense, the last part of the sentence makes sense then.
So of increasing turnout of voting abroad. No? No. Yes, please.
Still on the same paragraph. I mean, the feeling I have, I mean, and also from participating in the session, is that we're dealing with more or less two different aims, although interrelated between them. In Brazil, we are searching for both ends, expanding the universe of the Brazilians who live abroad, registered to vote, and of augmenting, increasing the turnout of those who are already registered to come to the polling station and vote. So we would rather have a phrase which leaves these two objectives somehow duly stressed. Thank you.
Okay, we may be back to the initial version, maybe slightly revised. Recognize the importance of identifying and promoting new initiatives, facilitating both voter registration and turnout.
My point was mainly about the part when provided for by law. That just didn't make sense for the second part of this initiative. So if I understand the work of the working group correctly, they wanted to promote initiatives on both sides for voter registration and for promoting voter turnout, right?
True.
So then my previous recommendation was not correct or not reflecting the will of the working group. My point was really about that the last part of the sentence didn't make sense because for the part of promoting promoting turnout of voting abroad.
Yes,
so I would suggest then deleting that last part.
Okay.
I was in the working group, and we might be able to solve this by adding, after facilitated voter registration and voting procedures, because the question was, how do we make sure that people living abroad can actually participate in the election? with the aim of increasing turnout.
But again, we go back to the intervention from the Brazilian participant on the fact that there is a double aim, double objective of, let's say, promoting new initiatives. First, increasing or facilitating the voter registration for voters abroad, and second, promoting a better turnout of voters abroad.
Yeah, but the thing was, if you facilitate the voting procedures and make it easier for people living abroad to actually vote, then that will increase turnout. That was what I understood from the working group.
So recognize the importance of identifying and promoting new initiatives, facilitating voter registration and voting procedures with the aim of increasing turnout for voting abroad. Should we forget the last part of this paragraph, when provided for by law? Is it implicit, enough explicit, enough implicit? The idea is not to create consents for countries not having voting abroad. Catherine, yes.
Maybe a way out of this would be to say promoting new initiatives, facilitating voter registration, voting procedures, and an increased voting turnout, if so provided by law or when provided by law. So you have all three and without a particular emphasis.
You cannot provide a law that should increase the voter turnout.
I'm not commenting on that. I'm just commenting.
No, I can understand that the last part of this sentence, that it was my initiative, is maybe confusing in this current wording. I have no strong feeling we can delete it, but the idea behind, we have to be sure that this sentence will be understood for countries having an existing system of voting abroad. This is my point. If it's not clear to you, then I can delete the last part of this sentence. I'm fine. Shimava.
Sorry, I have a small problem with the last part, when provided for by law. But if it's not provided by law, it's not possible. I mean, why? Everything is provided by law.
Well, yes, but it's maybe not clear as it is. So, okay. Gregor.
Well, no, the point is I understand what you mean. Yeah, there is controversy in some countries that do not want foreigners, basically people, expatriates, to vote. So that sends out the message that all the countries should allow that and should foster that. That's why I think that paragraph at the end was not bad. I'm just not sure how we could save it with respecting what was just said. But what we should not send out as a message is that we want all countries to allow expatriates.
It was my point, yeah.
Well, because this is really in the margin of the countries mostly. So that's why we should keep in mind to perhaps let it come back and think of some other wording.
Okay, now it was my point when we speak about new initiatives.
Yeah.
New initiatives could be understood only for countries having in their electoral legislation voting abroad, or also for inviting countries not having voting abroad. It's not the purpose of this conference to suggest to have voting abroad for all countries. So this is my point, and I'm still hesitating with the existing voting.
You could say perhaps were applicable instead of were provided by law. Simply were applicable.
For instance, yeah. Catherine, and then Shimavan.
Sorry, maybe we can say a new legal initiative, something like that. If you want to mention the idea with the law, I don't know.
Or the suggestion from Gregor, where applicable, then I think we avoid, let's say, the difficulty of dealing with law and with electoral legislation. We lost part of our native speakers, but we have still native speakers around. So they are, of course, invited to make any suggestions to improve the quality of the document. I don't force you, but I see Toby and some other colleagues, so don't hesitate to intervene to improve the text, if needed, of course. Okay, so can we agree on this revised version of this paragraph? All right, thank you. Paragraph number 24 underlines the importance of secure procedures when using new technologies in elections. It's common sense, but it's better to underline it. Gregor, yes.
I'm not sure if it's secured procedures or secure procedures would be more correct. I'm not sure if that...
You mean like this?
Yeah. This is more up to the native speakers to decide.
Point.
I think it means something different otherwise.
Yeah. Okay, can we agree on this paragraph? Thank you. Last, not last. 25, recognize the inherent cost for ensuring security in elections when using new technologies and the necessity to proceed to risk assessment before introducing such technologies. So here we refer to IT security and not to physical security or to security of polling stations, but security in, let's say, implementing new voting technologies or new technologies in different phases of the electoral processes. And it was a recurrent discussion of one of the working sessions about the cost and how to evaluate, how to assess this cost, which is of course quite challenging. So it's why I suggest not to refer to the necessity to have an agreement on the evaluation of the cost. It was one part of the discussion of this working group, but to limit ourselves to referring to this inherent cost. So is it not clear to you that we speak about security in elections, but security in IT systems, or should we specify it? Okay, thank you. Last one, encourage exchange of information on good practice concerning the use of new technologies. Here we want it to remain broad. It does not concern only EMBs, but also the interactions between EMBs and public authorities, but also at the international level. But we thought that it would not be useful to go into such details for this last paragraph. Can we agree on this last paragraph? Thank you. And there is a last one, but this year we did not find candidate. We have a candidate for 2018, but not for 2017, but I keep the secret for the time being. So I would like to thank you for your participation and for your involvement in this, in the elaboration and the improvement of these conclusions. So now we are in a phase of finalizing this conclusion, but this conference, but it's not my role, so I leave the floor to the moderators. And just a very concrete information, we will issue publicly these conclusions early next week. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We went forward very well with the adoption of the conclusions. Basically, we are at the end of the 13th conference of the electoral management bodies organized by the Venice Commission together with the Permanent Electoral Authority of Romania, with a great participation, very good participation. Also, we had a very generous topic, very good and very well-informed presentations, very good working sessions, and very pleasant 2 working days. I would like to thank you for all for the presentations, for the participations, participants, for the participation, for the work of the organizers, also for the work of the translator, and please listen to Mr. Pierre Garone, the representative of the Venice Commission. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Venice Commission, I would like to thank you also, you all, for your participation. I think Ms. Tokovac said what has to be said and thanked also the interpreters, the organizers, etc. So I won't repeat it, but this does not mean that I don't agree. I just confirm what he has said. And I hope we'll have the opportunity to meet in the next edition and editions of this Conference of Electoral Management Bodies, which now have taken place every year for 12 years. Thank you.